In our last set of lessons, we learnt about the 5 great dynasties that ruled under the Delhi Sultanate. As a quick recap, let us go over the names of those 5 dynasties. It was the Mamluk or the slave dynasty, that was the first dynasty to rule under the Delhi Sultanate, and this dynasty ruled from 1206 to 1290. This dynasty was followed by the very powerful, the mighty Khalji or Khilji dynasty. This second dynasty ruled from 1290 to 1320, following which came the Tuglak or Tuglak dynasty, and this dynasty ruled from 1320 to 1414. Following these 3 dynasties came the Said dynasty. This was the 4th dynasty to rule under the Delhi Sultanate, and it ruled from 1414 to 1451. And last but not the least ruled the Lodi Dynasty. This dynasty ruled from 1451 to 1526. So the period between 1206 and 1526, that is 1206 to 1506, marks the Delhi Sultanate. Now the maps here show you the extent of the various dynasties. In our previous lessons, we learned how these dynasties were established, and we also tried to understand how the various sultans of these dynasties administered their territories. Now you must remember that the sultans of the Delhi Sultanate were all foreign to India. These sultans were of Turkish and Afghan origin, that is, they had come from Central Asia to invade and conquer India. The extent of these dynasties shows you that these dynasties were quite huge, and the size of these dynasties varied from one dynasty to the other. Now, how were these dynasties established? Take the instance of a building in a construction site. It takes months and years for a building to be properly and completely constructed. This was also seen in the case of these 5 great dynasties. These dynasties did not become so huge just overnight. The sultans required months and years to build these huge dynasties. Now, considering that these sultans were foreign power in India, how did they manage to build such huge dynasties? How did they manage to annex new territories and kingdoms and bring everything under their control? It is this discussion that we will be taking up in today's lesson. That is, we will discuss how the expansion of the Delhi Sultanate took place. Having said that, we should keep in mind that without soldiers, no dynasty can increase its size. That is, soldiers are required to annex new territories or to bring new territories under their control. With this in mind, let us come to a discussion on how important the soldiers were during the Delhi Sultanate and how important they have been in consolidating these huge dynasties. This discussion on the soldiers brings us to the concept of garrison. A garrison is a group of soldiers who are meant to protect and defend a town or a city. From this takes birth the phrase garrison town. A garrison town simply means a town that has a military base nearby. During the 13th century, the sultans who were ruling under the Delhi Sultanate had limited control over these garrison towns. That is to say, they were restricted to the garrison towns only and they could not go beyond it. You must be questioning why their power was limited. That is, why did they not enjoy full control over the garrison towns? The question we just raised brings us to a discussion on hinterlands. What are hinterlands? Hinterlands are territories or lands that lie adjacent to cities or ports that supply goods and essential commodities to the town. Let us focus on this map. The red box shows you here the garrison town of Sindh. Similarly, this red box shows you the garrison town of Delhi, and this one shows you the garrison town of Bengal. The area that is marked in yellow around this garrison town are the hinterlands. Now these hinterlands are the lands adjacent to the city or port or the garrison town in this case that supplied essential commodities and goods to the garrison towns. Now you must be wondering why hinterlands are important in our discussion and how we came to this discussion on garrison towns. This is because the sultans of the various dynasties were not able to control the hinterlands of the garrison towns. We learnt that the hinterlands were lands adjacent to the garrison towns, and these hinterlands supplied goods and essential commodities to the towns. Now we also learnt that the sultans had limited or restricted power over the garrison towns and they could not go beyond the garrison towns. That is to say, they could not go beyond the garrison town into controlling these hinterlands. These hinterlands were not under their control. Now what was the outcome of this? That is the outcome of the sultans not being able to control the hinterlands. Since they were not able to control the hinterlands, they had to rely upon trade, tribute and plunder for supplies. What does this mean? We discussed that hinterlands supplied goods and commodities to the towns. Now since the sultans were not able to control these hinterlands, they had to instead fall back upon trade, tribute and even plunder to bring in supplies for their dynasties. Now this caused a major problem. Now you must be questioning why the sultans were not able to bring under their control these various garrison towns. Why they were not able to control these hinterlands? This is because the garrison towns during the rule of these various sultans were located in faraway places, and this map shows you the same. The garrison towns were not just located in Delhi. They were located in faraway and distant places like Sindh, Bengal. These places are very far because Bengal is very far from Delhi and so is Sindh. Now it was impossible for the sultan to bring all these hinterlands under his control and consolidate them within his dynasty. It is for this reason that the sultans could not control these hinterlands, as a result of which they could not control the hinterlands that were adjacent to these garrison towns. Now this must have left you wondering why the sultans could not control the garrison towns. What were the challenges posed to the sultans being able to control the garrison towns? Few of the challenges that the sultans faced were rebellion by locals. Now when the sultans were trying to consolidate the various garrison towns in Bengal and Sindh, the locals were rebelling against the sultan. The locals in these regions did not want to go under the control of the sultanate, which is why they were rebelling. Simultaneously with this, that is rebellion by locals, local wars also impeded and hindered the sultans from consolidating all the garrison towns. Along with that, nature also played a major role in this. Bad weather conditions were posing a huge challenge or impediment in this process of consolidating garrison towns. Bad weather conditions in turn disrupted communication, which is why the sultans were unable to consolidate the garrison towns. And finally, a very important reason why they were not able to perform this consolidation of garrison towns was Mongol attack from Afghanistan. In our previous lessons, we learnt how the Delhi Sultanate was under constant threat from the Mongols. Now, whenever any Mongol attack took place, the sultans had to commit themselves to defending their dynasty, which is why they could not focus on consolidating the garrison towns. So together all these reasons made the expansion of Delhi Sultanate very difficult. That is, the sultans found it very difficult to bring these various garrison towns and the adjacent hinterlands under their control. Now what was the result of this? The maps we saw in the beginning of this lesson showed us how great these 5 dynasties were. Now these dynasties couldn't have been this great without proper expansion. Now how did this expansion take place? Because there were so many reasons that went against the expansion of the Delhi Sultanate. Let us now find out how expansion took place and under which sultans this expansion took place. It was during the rule of Ghiyasuddin Balban of the Mamluk slave dynasty, Alauddin Khalji of the Khalji dynasty, and Muhammad Tuglak of the Tuglak Dynasty that the Delhi Sultanate expanded in size. Now how did this expansion take place? This expansion happened both internally and externally. These terms, that is internal expansion and external expansion, requires us to discuss these in greater detail. Now let us find out what this internal expansion of the Delhi Sultanate and external expansion of the Delhi Sultanate mean in this context. The internal expansion of the Delhi Sultanate was carried out in a set of campaigns that came to be known as the internal frontiers. Now what was this set of campaigns intended to do? This set of campaigns aimed at consolidating the hinterlands of various garrison towns. Previously we learnt that because the hinterlands were not under the control of the various sultans, it was difficult for them to earn revenue, to get supplies, which is why they had to rely on trade and plunder. But now in this series of campaigns under internal frontiers, the sultans aimed at bringing together all the garrison towns and their adjacent hinterlands. Now under which ruler did this internal expansion take place in a manifold way? It was during the rule of Ghiyasuddin Balban of the Mamluk slave dynasty that this internal expansion took place. How did this internal expansion took place? For the purpose of this expansion, forests were cleared in the Ganga Yamuna Doab. The Ganga Yamuna Doab is a very fertile tract of land. It had many forests, and in order to bring this area under the control of the dynasty, the forests in the Ganga Yamuna Doab were cleared. Now what was the result of the clearing of the forests? Because the forests in the Ganga Yamuna Doab were cleared, the hunter-gatherers and pastoralists who had been living there for centuries were expelled from their lands. And these lands were now given over to peasants. Now what was the purpose behind this? This entire internal expansion was meant to encourage agriculture. This tells you how the sultans wanted to increase the size of their dynasties simultaneously with promoting agriculture and irrigation. And it is for this reason that the forests in the Ganga Yamuna Doab were cleared and the hunter-gatherers and pastoralists who lived in this region were expelled from their lands. This explains what internal expansion during the Delhi Sultanate meant. This internal expansion or this set of campaigns were aimed at consolidating the garrison towns or the hinterlands of the garrison towns. Simultaneously with that, forests were also cleared in the Ganga Yamuna Doab so that agriculture could be encouraged in that very fertile region. But what other form of internal expansion took place? As in what other way internal expansion took place? A dynasty cannot be expanded properly without promoting trade. Now how could trade be promoted within the dynasty? In order to promote regional trade, new fortresses and garrison towns were established. Now what does this imply? This implies that when new towns are being established, many people will come to stay in those towns. Now when many people come to stay in a region or in a town, markets will also crop up, because markets are required to supply goods to the people who have come to live in those towns. Now the development of markets facilitate trade. So the establishment of new fortresses and garrison towns meant that new people were coming to stay in these areas, and in this way trade was also facilitated. We previously learnt that forests were cleared in the Ganga-Yamuna Doab to promote agriculture, and by the establishment of fortresses and garrison towns, trade was also being facilitated. So by facilitating trade and promoting agriculture, these rulers expanded their territories internally. But you must have been wondering that only internal expansion couldn't have made the dynasties as huge as they were. For this, something else was also required. That is, something along with this internal expansion. That something that was required and that was performed along with this internal expansion was the expansion externally, or building up external frontiers. Now we learnt that during the rule of Ghiyasuddin Balban, internal expansion of the Delhi Sultanate took place. External expansion started with the rule of Alauddin Khalji. Alauddin Khalji was the mightiest of sultans of the Khalji dynasty, and it was he who, under the leadership of Malik Kafur, carried out the Deccan Expedition. What did this Deccan Expedition mean? On account of this Deccan Expedition, for the first time, the Delhi Sultanate now travelled beyond the river Narmada into the southern part of India. So previously, it was only the northern and the central part of the country that was under the control of the Delhi Sultanate. But during the rule of Alauddin Khalji, he launched the Deccan Expedition and now brought under his control areas like Devagiri, Warangal, Varasamudra, Tanjore, Madurai, Rameshwaram. The area that is marked in yellow in this map shows you the extent of Alauddin Khalji's empire. And on account of the Deccan Expedition, through which he went to conquering the southern part of India, we can see that all these areas were now being brought under the control of the Delhi Sultanate. This Khalji dynasty was followed by the Tuglak Dynasty, that was the third dynasty to rule under the Delhi Sultanate. And it was during the rule of Muhammad Tuglak that this external expansion of the dynasty came to an end. This area marked in green shows you the extent of the empire of Muhammad Tuglak. We learnt that during the rule of Alauddin Khalji, the extent of the Delhi Sultanate was this much. But during the rule of Muhammad Tuglak, the Delhi Sultanate had spread to almost all the parts of the country. So it is through this external expansion that the Delhi Sultanate became as mighty, as huge, as great as has gone down in the pages of history. Now let me ask you a question before proceeding with this lesson. Who initiated military expeditions to the southern part of India? That is, which Sultan did this Deccan Expedition? Was it Alauddin Khalji? Was it Muhammad Tuglak? Was it Sikandar Lodi? Or was it Ghiyasuddin Balban? Yes, you are right. It was the Khalji Sultan Alauddin Khalji who carried out the Deccan Expedition under the leadership of his most trusted man, that was Malik Kafur. But all things that rise to glory also have to come to an end. Such was also seen in the case of the Delhi Sultanate. The various sultans of these dynasties expanded their territories. But if you remember the map that was shown at the beginning of this lesson, you will understand that While the Delhi Sultanate was great and huge and spanned almost the entire country during the Khalji and the Tuglak Dynasty, it slowly started shrinking in size during the Sayyid and the Lodi Dynasties. So it was with Lodi Dynasty that the Delhi Sultanate came to an end. In our previous lesson, where we learnt about the rule of the Lodi Dynasty and how it came to an end, bringing the entire Delhi Sultanate to an end, we got to know that the Battle of Panipat, that is the first Battle of Panipat, was fought between Babur and the forces of Ibrahim Lodi in the year 1526. So, it was the first Battle of Panipat in 1526 that marked the formal end of the Delhi Sultanate. The Delhi Sultanate now ceased to exist and the power over the country of India now came into the hands of the Mughal. So it was with the defeat of Ibrahim Lodi that the Lodi dynasty came to an end, simultaneously marking the end of the Delhi Sultanate. After this, power over the then Indian subcontinent came into the hands of the Mughals. So the Delhi Sultanate, or the various dynasties that ruled under the Delhi Sultanate, came to an end. In this series of lessons, we have initially introduced ourselves to the Delhi Sultanate. We learnt about the 5 great dynasties that ruled under the Delhi Sultanate, and then in separate lessons, we learnt about these various dynasties in particular, where we learnt how the sultans administered their dynasties, how they came to power, how they ruled, and how they fell out of power or how they died. With this, we come to an end of our discussion on the Delhi Sultanate. It was Babur who defeated Ibrahim Lodi, finally putting an end to the Delhi Sultanate. After the Delhi Sultanate, it were the Mughals and the mighty Mughal Empire that ruled India from 1526 to 1761 for 235 long years. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. You can also register for free at DeltaStep.com or download the DeltaStep app to learn one-to-one with our amazing teachers, or to get access to all our 5,000 plus amazing videos as per your school syllabus. Master each topic with our adaptive practice technology. Get million plus questions with step-by-step solutions and unlimited mock tests. Get all your doubts resolved instantly. Learn via games and win amazing prizes like PlayStations and iPads. So at DeltaStep, learning is not just fun and easy, it's rewarding too. So register for free now.